On today's edition of The Front Row, we are at the Lubbock Public Media Studios, and our special guest is B.C. Gilbert, who has done so much to make Lubbock a better place to live, and we're going to find out all about that today. We're going to speak specifically about the Friendly Cowboy Band that has been reunited and exists here in the Cultural Arts District here in downtown Lubbock, and the sculptor and the innovator, the builder of all of this is with us. BC, welcome to the Front Row. Happy to have you.
I'm glad to be here.
So first of all, for people who don't know you, tell us just a little bit about you and your journey and coming to be an artist and how that formed.
Originally I'm from Amarillo, Texas, where I was born and raised. Lived there my whole life until I was left home. As far as being an artist goes, it was something really that I've always wanted to do since I was a child. I mean, I know a lot of people don't discover they're an artist or want to be an artist till later in life, but seriously, from the time I can remember, that was what I wanted to do, was be an artist or a cowboy. But actually, I think the artist is probably better. But so I'm really happy to find myself at mid-career and still doing it. Right. Yeah, that's how I started.
All right. Were you good with your hands? Did it come naturally?
I've always been kind of a craftsman, and even from a young age, I was, working with things and building things. Like a lot of children, I drew a lot. Drew a lot. Actually, got in trouble for drawing when I was in school, but my dad had a welding shop, and so I did get to learn how to work with my hands a little bit more, using things like a cutting torch and welding machines and, fabrication. And then I did that, for a living in different times in my life. And so, I think I'd say I was pretty good with my hands.
Right. So you got practical experience with the kind of materials that you would need in order to have your career.
Practical, and I got introduced to those materials.
Yeah. Great. Well, and then I guess you left home to pursue your education.
So something like that. I left home when I was 19. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. My parents, I loved them to death, but they really didn't prepare me very well for life after high school. I don't know if that's because I was the oldest. So I kind of made the decision. I had the opportunity to move away and live with some friends and work my rent off. And that's what I did. And my father did not want me to be an art major. He didn't see the point in it. He wanted me to be something more practical, like a history teacher or get a history degree. So there were some problems there. But once I moved away and got into college, started taking art classes, that's where I found my passion. And, to the point that when I graduated, I decided to go ahead and look at going to graduate school. And that's what brought me to Lubbock.
Where did you go first?
To graduate school?
Or to school?
Oh, I got my bachelor's of fine arts from Cameron University in Lawton, Oklahoma. Okay. It seems like I've never managed to live more than a 200-mile radius of where I was born and raised. So,
yeah. All right, and then you came to graduate school here at Texas Tech.
I came here in 1997, and I ended up actually taking a year off, leave of absence as they call it, and so I ended up graduating in 2001. It's a 3-year program. If I had gone straight through, I would have graduated in 2000. But I think it worked out better.
Right. Well, along the way, did you discover things that you specifically liked to do? Certain mediums, certain aspects of art that appealed to you?
Well, when I first moved here, I came here as a mixed media painter, and that's what pretty much I continued to do. And I had a sculpture background, and my secondary focus was sculpture. But I stayed away from sculpture for a long time because I guess I thought sculptures always had to be big and bulky. But a few years ago, I started doing sculpture again. I started doing a little smaller scale, almost like tabletop things, and it's worked out really well. So I think one thing about being an artist is you have to constantly evolve. You don't want to do the same thing over and over and over again. So I'm sure I'll get back to painting one of these days, but right now I'm pretty focused on sculpture and public art in general. That's what really one of the things I want to focus on is public art, and then I'll let it run its course, and then I'll go back to printmaking, maybe let it run its course, and I'll just keep changing it up a little bit.
Right, some variety. That's great. Well, tell us a little bit about the genesis of the Friendly Cowboy String Band.
Okay, so the Friendly Cowboy Western String Band was actually influenced by these little sculptures, folk art sculptures. I've got a few of them that people like my grandfather used to make them out of square head nails or like horseshoe nails, and they just use these kind of pre-made objects as a material to make these little figurines. And the old man that owned my father's welding shop, who had grown up during the Depression and World War II era and things like that, he would make these little scenes of like rural farm life and ranch life, make these little figurines out of cowboys, make windmills, make little outhouses, barbed wire fences, and things like that. And so I grew up seeing that. And I think at the time I probably thought it was kind of neat, but I probably also thought it was kind of hokey. It wasn't until later that I started to really appreciate it. So anyway, I think that one of the hardest things about being an artist is knowing what to make. And once you get on a roll, it just starts to come easier, because each time you do something, that's when that whole evolution process starts. But with the Friendly Cowboy Western String Band, I actually made this one figure, made a little model of it, basically off the kind of the blue central figure there. I took it out to a spot where there was an interstate overpass in the background, and I photographed it. And so, really look at the photograph, you can't tell if it's 4 inches tall or if it's 12 feet tall. And that was the whole purpose of it. And so I submitted it here in Lubbock, actually. They had a program at the time, TxDOT, in conjunction with the Lubbock Arts Alliance. And I'd had a few other friends that had done it, and I'd been encouraged to do it. And I never heard back from them. And so I finally, and I'm used to getting rejection letters, I think most artists are. So I finally kind of started sending some emails trying to figure out what's going on, and I was told that, well, the guy who was in charge of that program has retired, so we're not going to do it anymore. And so I was like, okay, well, that's all it is. Well, then to 2020, Elizabeth Regner contacted me, and she remembered that initial proposal from 10 years earlier, but she wanted to do 4 sculptures, and she told me how, the lease program worked and this and that. So I said, well, what if we make like an actual band, And she liked that idea, so I made some little models, and I photographed them, and I sent them to her, and she loved it. We were getting all excited about starting it, and then COVID hit, and everything kind of came to a halt. And so I kind of thought, well, that's just the way it goes, here it goes. But about a year later, she contacted me and said, we're ready to go back. There are going to be some changes here and there, but we found the funding somewhere else, and so that's how it started.
Great. So it wasn't really a commission because you already had a piece of art. Is that right?
It wasn't a commission because the artworks were just leased.
Ah, okay.
And it's kind of a great thing about it is they're leased for a certain amount, for a 2-year period. And then at the end of those 2 years, I still own the artwork.
Right.
And then that's what allowed me to, offer them for sale to the city.
Right. And I guess during that time was when we saw them as individuals in various places around Lubbock.
Definitely.
People would see those as
for sure.
How did they come together as a band?
Well, when we installed them about a month ago, that's the first time I saw them all together. So I think they look great. I think they work well together. Yeah. And like I told other people, I never saw the sculptures actually stand upright until we installed them, because my studio space, it's not tiny, but it's not tall enough to have the sculpture standing upright. So fortunately, they turned out balanced and everything, and they stood upright okay. Of course, we still fastened them to the bases, but
right. So they were leased and as individuals, but then at some point somebody made the suggestion, I guess, that the city would like to actually purchase them and keep them. Is that right?
Yes, and I don't know exactly how that worked, but I feel like there were people that were rooting for me and were kind of on my side, and I think I have a sneaking suspicion that Emily Wilkinson might have been behind part of that. I don't know the whole basis, but that's kind of what I think happened.
Right. Well, they're beautiful. We just cut the ribbon on them in a ceremony just a little earlier, and they're all together. There's 4 of them. They just look magnificent.
Thank you.
And there's a singer.
Yeah.
And a fiddle player.
And
a guitarist and a bass.
That's right. Yeah. Doghouse bass player.
So. I love that. Great. Was any specific inspiration, any person for any of those, or did they just come to mind?
Not individually, but after living in Lubbock for a while, I became friends with lots of musicians, and I feel like I've seen personas of every one of those sculptures around, so I mean, that all ties together.
Right. And so what's your next project? Where do you live now, and what are you doing?
I live in Wichita Falls. I moved there in 2005. I work for the school district. I'm a welding instructor, actually. I taught art for 10 years previous. My next project, I don't really know. I have been submitting some requests for qualifications for some public art projects, and kind of waiting to hear back on those. And some of these are like, once you get your request for qualifications looked at, if I become like a finalist, one of 3 finalists, then I can submit a proposal for a certain thing. I'm actually looking at bringing other people on board to help me, as far as putting our heads together and designing things. I feel confident in the fabrication and installation process, but I'm not always the best designer, So, and a lot of these submissions, call for like an artist team. It's good to have someone who can do what I can do. It's also good to have someone who's like really good on the computer. It can do like computer design and things like that. I can't keep learning everything over and over again.
Right. Well, you've certainly done a great job for the city of Lubbock. My goodness, the friendly Cowboy Western String Band is positioned in its permanent location on Avenue O. It's on the northeast corner, just down the street from the Buddy Holly Hall. And so if you're around town, any of you out there listening, you can go and see them. And the sculptor is B.C. Gilbert, who has been our guest today on the front row. B.C., thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You bet.